I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today. We are about to unpack the completely fascinating, deeply polarizing, and honestly kind of mind-boggling world of a guy who operates at the absolute outer limits of the justice system. We're talking about a defense attorney who actively embraces the most reviled clients in society and defends them with a ferocity that literally leaves other lawyers speechless. Okay, let's just dive right into this. Now, if you're a fan of the show Breaking Bad, you probably remember this iconic line from Jesse Pinkman: "You don't want a criminal lawyer, you want a criminal lawyer," right? That line perfectly introduced us to Saul Goodman, the fast-talking, boundary-pushing attorney we all know. Well, the source material we're digging into today asks a pretty compelling question. Is there an actual, real-world counterpart to Saul Goodman? And when you ask around the New York legal scene who the absolute most outrageous, effective, and envelope-pushing criminal defense attorney is, the answer is totally unanimous. You better call Howard Greenberg. Just listen to how he describes his own work. He says, "Advocacy is such a dense topic. I think it is witchcraft. It is deep. It is alchemy." That instantly sets the tone for Howard's whole worldview, doesn't it? He doesn't look at his profession as just a dry series of motions and case law. To him, in his own words, it's witchcraft, it's alchemy. He really views the courtroom as this space where absolute transformation has to happen. He says flat out, there are no moral victories in this business if you don't win. You just simply have to win. And his whole persona, it totally matches this extreme philosophy. The guy literally refers to himself as the vampire slayer in the morning, comparing himself to Professor Van Helsing. No joke. He's famously known for his jet black hair plugs, his flashy and honestly sometimes a little silly suits, and a wildly abrasive communication style. But here's the thing, as his peers point out, it's a highly calculated madness. He knows exactly how to push the envelope right up to the edge without crossing that line into self-destruction. Section 1, Courtroom Witchcraft and Alchemy. So let's break down exactly what this looks like in practice, because beneath that wild exterior is a deeply intentional strategist. The absolutely crucial thing to understand here is that Howard choreographs every single second he's in front of a jury. Take his opening statement routine, for example. When the judge calls on him, he doesn't just stand up like a normal person. Step 1, he freezes in his chair for up to 30 seconds. 30 seconds. He uses this awkward, agonizing silence to just completely command the room. He makes everyone uncomfortable, making them wonder, what on earth is he waiting for? Then, step 2, he rises slowly. Step 3, he moves briskly to the lectern. Step 4, he starts with his hands in this steeple gesture. And finally, step 5, he ramps up to what he calls his sledgehammer gesticulations. It is pure, calculated psychological theater. And, his tactics during cross-examination are just as out there. Any traditional lawyer is going to tell you never, ever ask a question you don't already know the answer to, and definitely never ask the ultimate question. Like, if a witness couldn't see well because it was dark out, a regular lawyer establishes that it was dark, and then they sit down. But not Howard. Our sources outline how Howard will march up and ask the ultimate question. So you couldn't actually see the person who robbed you, could you? And then he won't stop. He'll ask it 5 more times in 5 different ways, aggressively pushing and pushing until the witness literally breaks down and cries. This all feeds into Howard operating with just an extreme level of abrasion. We're talking insulting opposing counsel or saying incredibly shocking things during his summations. He says, "If I impart to a jury the impression that if their ass was in a sling, they'd want me sitting next to them, I can do whatever the fuck I want." He's doing this to project this aura of absolute, unshakable confidence. He believes that if he can convince the jury that he is the ultimate protector, the guy you desperately want your corner when the chips are down, then he's earned the right to dictate the terms of the entire courtroom. Section 2, Defending the Indefensible. Now, this level of intense, zealous advocacy brings us to a highly controversial reality. We need to look at exactly who Howard is fighting so hard for. I really want you to keep this question in the back of your mind as we go deeper into this explainer. How do you defend someone who has already confessed to a horrific crime? Right? That is the central, unavoidable friction of Howard's career, and it completely challenges our everyday, normal understanding of right and wrong. Because Howard's record of victories is pretty much rivaled only by the rap sheets of his clients. He has defended rapper Bobby Shmurda, who was accused of leading a violent bang. He defended the so-called Lolita lawyer who confessed to paying a woman for access to her teenage daughters. He eagerly takes on alleged sex traffickers. And, probably most shockingly of all, he defended Levy Aaron, the confessed killer and dismemberer of an 8-year-old boy in Brooklyn. That Levy Aaron case is maybe the starkest example of Howard's whole methodology. He didn't take this case for a big payday. In fact, he took it completely for free. Why? Well, he read in the paper that the judge was giving the defense attorneys a hard time, and Howard just couldn't resist stepping right into the fray. He fully intended to mount this aggressive insanity defense. And get this, he actually views the fact that Aaron eventually took a plea deal as a personal failure. He wanted to take that all the way to trial and win it. It's wild, but this brilliantly illustrates how Howard completely compartmentalizes the horror of a crime. When people pressed him on the incredibly gruesome details of what Aaron did, Howard just points to those exact horrifying details as absolute proof of insanity. He stated, "If he wasn't crazy, nobody's crazy." Do you see what he does there? He completely strips away the emotion that outrages the general public, and he zeroes in purely on the cold, mechanical, legal definition of the defense. Section 3. The ethics of criminal law. To truly wrap our heads around a lawyer like Howard, we have to understand the specific rulebook he is operating under. Our sources introduce us to legal ethics attorney Nicole Hyland, and she explains this really foundational concept called zealous advocacy. Basically, a lawyer has an obligation to do everything within the bounds of the law to defend their client, regardless of personal feelings or the client's guilt. A criminal defense attorney's job isn't to be a moral compass. Think of it like this. An oncologist's job is to beat the cancer, right? Well, a defense attorney's job is to beat the prosecutor. They absolutely must fight for their client, even if they know for an absolute fact that the client is guilty. So, as you can see, there is a massive contrast between these two worlds. In real-world ethics, which focuses on absolute morality, staying silent when you know someone committed a terrible crime feels deeply, fundamentally immoral. But legal ethics, they focus on zealous advocacy. They dictate that a defense attorney must remain silent, then defend their client vigorously. Defending the guilty isn't just an option, it's a constitutional requirement. So actions that look horribly offensive or wrong to the outside world are often just the constitutional requirements of the legal system playing out in real time. And Howard? He takes this ethical detachment to the absolute maximum. He says, "I render service for money. You can threaten to kill me and my family, and I render service for money." He actually notes that a client once threatened to kill him and his family, and Howard still walked right into that courtroom and got the man acquitted. He absolutely refuses to take his client's actions personally. He states it so flatly. If he takes your money, you get 100% of his loyalty and his effort. No exceptions. And here is the core thesis that drives this guy. When people ask him how he reconciles putting dangerous people back out on the street, he explains it like this. "I'm more afraid of the government than I am of some individual scumbag who I represent." He fears the vast, powerful, crushing machinery of the government way more than any single individual criminal. This deep-seated fear and intense distrust of the state, that is the engine behind his entire career. Section 4. The origin of a warrior. Which brings us to a really interesting question. How does a person develop such an intense, almost militant distrust of the government in the first place? To see how his past built his present, we have to rewind a bit. Howard grew up in the slums of the Lower East Side with a violently mentally ill father, a father who would literally beat his grandmother right in front of him. As a kid, he felt entirely powerless. As a young adult, he actually earned a full scholarship to Cornell, but he threw it away and floundered for years. But the real pivotal turning point happened later, in the 1980s, when he discovered his then-wife's father was actually a mafia don. That unbelievable connection led to the infamous Pizza Connection raid, which became one of the longest federal trials in U.S. history. Howard was physically there when government agents and drug-sniffing dogs completely swarmed his family. He describes it as a deeply, deeply traumatizing moment. Feeling that overwhelming, unstoppable power of the state crawling all over the people he cared about sparked a lifelong vow. Right then and there, he decided he was going to become a criminal defense attorney, specifically to fight back against that very system. So, post-grad, he started out as a public defender at the Legal Aid Society. But guess what? He absolutely hated it. He felt like the system emasculated lawyers because they were way too focused on playing it safe, just preserving the record and trying cases for an eventual appeal. But Howard wanted to win. So he jumped over to private practice, totally absorbed the teachings of trial lawyer Herbert Stern, and developed his uncompromising play-to-win methodology. And while his tactics undoubtedly offend a lot of people, they are literally life-saving to others. Take his former client, James Felix. James was facing 15 years on a weapons charge and had allegedly already confessed to the cops. Howard took the case to trial and won a full acquittal. Now, James just wants to live a regular life, find a steady job, have kids. He says Howard fought for him with the spirit of a warrior, treating him like he was his own son. To James, Howard isn't some legal villain. He literally refers to him as his godfather. So all of this leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative question. We've seen the abrasive tactics, we've seen the shocking clients, and we've explored his uncompromising philosophy. But when the massive, overwhelming weight of the government is bearing down on an individual, does true justice actually require lawyers like Howard Greenberg? Does a free society literally need people willing to push the boundaries to the absolute limit? It's a hugely complex reality, and I really hope this explainer has given you a clear, structured look into the morality and the madness of zealous advocacy. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today, and hey, I encourage you to keep questioning the systems around us.